Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live by MHT. Mental Health Today is a social enterprise aiming to connect mental health professionals across India and abroad to one platform where they can share evidence based information and awareness about different mental health disorders or psychological issues through blogs, podcasts, and webinars. You can visit the website at mentalhealthtoday.co.in. My name is Vanisha, and I'll be the host for today's live. And the topic for today is abusive relationships and mental health. Abusive relationships can sometimes not be seen by others, but can have a big impact on the victim's mental health. Sometimes abuse starts off as a small incident, but it can increase and get bigger as time goes on. Thus, it is important to address this issue and spread more awareness about it to help someone who is either getting abused or knows someone who's being abused. Joining us today is Ms. Gargi Vishnoi. She is working with the Fortis Healthcare as a counseling psychologist with work domain of counseling of IPD and OPD patients. Welcome, Gargi, to our live.
Hi, Vanisha. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me today. And I love the topic that you've picked up. It's not spoken about a lot, so
Yeah,
kudos on
that's
that.
why. Yeah. So just to start off, Gargi, can you define an abusive relationship for us? So just that it's since the it like beginning, it's clear to all of us.
Right. So, in a relationship, when one person is out there, it is characterized by this one person who's subjecting the other person to trauma, exposing them to any sort of traumatic event, which might include psychological, physical, um, uh, I would say emotional and financial, all these sort of trauma basically, and which might often lead to anxiety, depression, of willfully trying to expose you to that is an abusive relationship. And one quick thing that I'd like to add here is that abusive relationship is not necessarily only between couples. So it can also be, and it is very prevalent, especially in conservative societies, between parents and children also, right? So parental abuse is also very prevalent. But today, since our topic is basically couples, so we'll take that up. But yes, essentially, an abusive relationship is wherein one person subjects the other person to any sort of trauma, physical, emotional, psychological.
So, most of the times I feel people don't get to know if there is an abusive relationship. Sometimes people who are involved in the relationship don't get to know both the abuser or the victim, and people who
Yes.
are around us who might be seeing them on a daily basis won't know if there is abuse going on. So, what are some of the signs that can sort of help identify an abusive relationship?
Right. So the most overt sign would be physically hurting you, right? And it doesn't only have to be beatings. It doesn't have to be punches or, using some external material to hurt you. It can also be shoving, just pushing somebody in the door, shoving somebody, even when somebody's trying to threaten you with throwing things and being violent generally, maybe not even towards the partner, but also just in their general demeanor throughout the relationship is very, very, uh, what do you say, violent. That is when that's one sign. And then they threaten you. Either they threaten to hurt you or they threaten to hurt themselves in order to for you to behave in a certain way, in order to emotionally blackmail you. And say emotional abuse or any sort of abuse, it starts very gradually. It
Hmm.
doesn't one day directly jump onto somebody hitting you mercilessly or somebody just berating you a lot. It starts slowly. So it starts with, calling you little names, like stupid, are you a fool, and you don't get anything, essentially also blaming you for a lot of things that you're not responsible for. Then it also comes from constantly pointing out your drawbacks, like things you would must be most insecure about, and things you are scared about mostly are the ones that they pick on. Like if somebody is really conscious about this, the size of their ears, for example, so they would
Hmm.
constantly pick on that, and then they would berate you with that, and then following you, spying on you, uh, checking your phone without your permission or with an intent to blackmail you later. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is the a biggest way in which somebody sort of emotionally breaks you or emotionally abuses you. And in gaslighting, what happens is that this person invalidates your reality. In gaslighting, this person completely denies the existence of the problem that you might have. For example, if you said that, okay, last week you misbehaved with me in front of your friends. So this in gaslighting, if a person is gaslighting you, he would or she would say that, oh my God, that never happened, or you're lying, or you're fabricating stories, or you're overreacting, you're too dramatic, right? So this is essentially invalidating your entire reality. So it makes you question yourself, okay, did that really happen? And basically mocking you in front of others also is something that you can see. Sometimes you know that somebody cracked a joke, your partner cracked a joke in front of your friends and his friends or her friends, um, and it's all fun and games, nothing wrong. But when it starts to become mocking, that is when you it makes you feel uncomfortable. That is when you should know that yes, this might lead to abuse. I am not saying that all of these signs, if they occur once in a blue moon, that it's an abusive relationship. But if this is consistently happening, and if it is having a negative impact on you, if you become more unsure of yourself, you get unhappy, sad, you're walking on eggshells, things like that. So that is when it's time to understand that yes, these are some signs of abuse. And they never apologize. They never take accountability of their actions. And um, I think that's that. These are some signs of abuse that we might miss. I know that physical abuse is very, very overt and in your face. So you know that, yes, this is happening. But psychological abuse is so slow and it's so insidious that it creeps up slowly. And it is usually seen in psychopathic and narcissistic relationships when one partner is psychopathic or narcissistic.
So, like you said, that abuse is not uh, just physical. What are some other forms of abuse that are out there?
And there is emotional abuse, of course, like I said. Then there is sexual abuse, of course. That sexual abuse is not only out of the relationships. A lot of times people feel that, okay, he or she is just my partner and whatever they want to do with me, it's just I'll satisfy their requirements or their sexual fantasies. But when it starts to make you uncomfortable and you've conveyed your discomfort, that is also abuse. If they still force you into doing things that you don't want to do, um, any sort of sexual acts they want you to perform wherein you are not a willing participant. Rape is also part of that. And moving on, verbal abuse, like hurling abuses at you, um, calling you names, shouting, yelling, berating, all of that. Then there is obstetric violence, that abuse wherein your reproductive rights are not really with you. Like they would dehumanize you for being a woman, that they would say that you don't have the power to do this, you don't have power to do that, you don't have enough strength. And see, sometimes one odd time when you're unable to do something physically, that's something completely different. But when this is constant, that is when it falls into the category of abuse, right? And then there is financial. So financial is wherein they take all your financial independence, and financial control of the entire relationship lies in one person in the household. That's also that's also a form of abuse. And if you have a problem with that, and problem with that doesn't necessarily have to be that I am having the worst time of my life. Problem could be that it makes you uncomfortable, basically, that you're not okay with it, basically. So these are some types of abuses.
Great. So, like a lot of times, even if someone knows that someone is getting abused, and some of the times the victim also knows that they are getting abused, like physical abuse is the emotional abuse. Some people might miss on that this is abuse,
Hmm.
but physical abuse you cannot because it's like physical, right? So, then a lot of other people have questions like, why do people stay in an abusive relationship? And because clearly this is abuse, then why do people choose to stay in this relationship? So, like, what's like a victim's psyche behind that?
And it is one of the most asked questions by the
Yeah.
people who've never been through abuse.
Yeah.
because they don't know what it's like to be in an abusive relationship. And let me tell you, let me break it to you that honestly, getting out of a healthy relationship is easier than getting out of an abusive relationship. Okay, that is because it completely breaks you as a human being. Abusive relationships have creeped up on you slowly. You don't realize that when are you suddenly trapped. Like it's slowly building up, it's creeping on you. So number one is that it is not sudden. So this person never really thought that it's going to escalate up to a level of abuse. Then what an abuser does in a relationship is that they take a lot of control away from you. They
Hmm.
take away a lot of confidence from you, your choices they take away. So essentially you feel that your self-worth really goes down. The self-esteem is the lowest. People that I've spoken to who have been in abusive relationships, and honestly I did a poll yesterday on my Instagram, and you won't believe more than half of the people who answered have been in an abusive relationship. And over 80%, somewhere nearing to 90% were the people who know somebody who's been in an abusive relationship. So just
Wow.
imagine that it's so common, and yet we somehow victim blame that you should have gotten out of it.
Hmm.
And why would somebody stay in a relationship where there's constant abuse and everything? And what we don't get is because either we don't know how it operates, we don't know how it functions, or we've never been in one. There are just two ways how somebody could be that um, unempathetic to somebody who's been in an abusive relationship. So once then there is low self-esteem and lack of self-worth, that this person might feel that they will feel that this is the best for me. And at
Hmm.
least because here, like I said, that this abuser picks on the smallest insecurities of yours and the biggest insecurities of yours and makes you feel bad about them and never empowers you. So what happens is that quickly you start to lose your confidence. And once you don't feel great about yourself, you feel that this abuser is doing you a favor by being in a
Hmm.
relationship with you. They put themselves on a pedestal.
Yeah. Then
So
you just want approval from them of any
yes,
sort.
yes. And even when, and you feel that, thank God, at least I have her or him in my life. And
Hmm.
if I get out of this relationship, I might never find somebody, because they categorically, in most of these abusive relationships, they say that I'm doing you a favor by being with you, that nobody would ever want to be with you, right?
Hmm.
So self-esteem, self-confidence, and then there is a sense of familiarity that stops these people, right? A lot of relationships, not so great relationships, also people choose to stay in because they feel that at least I know this person, however good or
Yeah.
bad they are. Like it's like I know this is the devil, so might as well know the devil and be with them rather than venturing out into something new. And
Hmm.
our brain essentially works on inertia, and somebody who doesn't know inertia is just like, it's a physics principle wherein a body tends to stay at rest unless there's an external pressure applied to it, which means that your brain loves to stay where it is. Like it
Hmm.
it does not like to change. Our
So
brains
the
hate
idea
change.
of comfort zone is very real
Yes,
then. Yeah.
yes, yes. So that becomes your comfort zone. See, because it also involves a lot of self-pity, and self pity is the easiest place to be, however, popular media may portray it. But it is so
Hmm.
easy to feel bad for yourself, for others to feel bad for you, to get sympathy from yourself and others that you're in this abusive relationship. So, what happens is that you don't want to work upon yourself. It gives you a
Hmm.
leeway in that. It also makes you feel that, oh, I know this person so well, at least I know he's bad or she's bad. That's fine, but at least I know that they are bad. Right?
Hmm.
Then there's a lot of isolation that happens in these
Hmm.
abusive relationships. So what this abuser does is that they tend to isolate you from your friends, your family. They badmouth the people who are close to you. So
Hmm.
you eventually start to isolate them, because then sometimes you believe your partner, and sometimes you were just like, okay, just to appease my partner, I would not talk to these people. And then
Hmm.
even when your friends and family can see that there are clear signs of abuse, but you're not listening to them, you're not opting out of the relationship, they also kind of leave you alone. That okay,
Hmm.
fine, if you don't want to listen to us, then. So there's also isolation that makes a person stay, because once they want to get out and they look around that there's social support, so that's not there, right? So
Hmm.
there's no social support for them. Then biggest is lack of knowledge of abuse, that people don't know that they're in an abusive relationship, like you said initially. that
Yeah.
the abuser also might not know that what they're doing is abuse. And this is
Yeah.
so common in Indian society. It's unbelievable.
Yes, for sure.
And on a regular basis that I talk to people,
Yeah.
that parental abuse especially is so common because
Like that's what I feel like in most abusive relationships. It's even if it's like the first act of physical violence,
mm,
so many people are in shock that how did this
uh,
just happen.
mhm,
And like they feel like, oh, maybe this was just a one time thing. And I
yes,
feel like a lot of victims also do end up giving the abuser a lot of chances, like, oh, might not
yes,
happen. That's, I think that is one more thing that makes them
yeah.
stay.
That enables them because they feel that, okay, I wasn't called out for this behavior, or I wasn't even punished for this behavior. See, there are some chances, even law gives a lot of relief to people who have murdered in um, a fit of rage. Okay. So when there's a fit of rage and then there occurs a murder, so the sentence is very little as compared to an actual pre-planned, premeditated murder. So which means that if your emotions are running really high, so one random act of something like that can still be forgiven, that okay, fine, maybe they didn't know what else to do. But when you don't actually make it a point to convey to that person that this is not okay and this will lead to
Hmm.
something, withdrawal of my love or whatever, so this kind of makes them more brazen the next time. And then there is financial dependence, because a lot of abusers don't give financial independence to the victim, so they don't know where to go, especially in our brown scenario, wherein women are a lot of times financially dependent on their partners. And so this happens that the only thing that they want to say is that you talk to aunties, and that how could you go through all of this for so many years, there's such torment, and they would say that मैं अपने बच्चों को लेके कहाँ जाती, like where would
Exactly.
have
Yeah,
I
I
taken
think
my kids.
for like in a very typical heterosexual scenario where a
Mm-hmm.
man abuses the woman, most
Mm-hmm.
women I feel they stay because A, kids are involved, B,
Mm-hmm.
finances. Yeah, those
Yes.
two are the biggest reasons I feel.
Yes. And a lot of times, financial independence is taken away even when women are working. So they go and give their money to the husbands. And I am talking majoritarian in a way, majoritarian way, because when I looked at the stats, it's obviously predominantly women who are, which we're going
Yeah,
to come up later. And
yeah,
lack of social support is again isolation, because you lose everybody during this abusive relationship. So that's why you tend to stay uh, in an abusive relationship. So familiarity, self pity. Then there is blackmail. Blackmail is another thing wherein the person would say that I'm going to slit my wrist, I'm going to cut my nerves, my arteries, whatever.
yeah.
So that's another reason that people tend to stay.
So as this topic is getting more knowledge and people, it's getting picked up by people, it's being talked about a lot. There is this term cycle of abuse that keeps coming up. So can you tell us more about that? What's the cycle of abuse?
Right. So majorly, I'm going to break it down to a number of uh, stage stages, but otherwise they're just four. What I'm going to tell you is with examples that the first stage starts with in the name of overprotection and in the name of love. I mean,
Hmm.
overprotection in the name of love. Sometimes people find it cute, but
Hmm.
they feel that, oh, my significant other is so jealous. They are so possessive that they wouldn't want me to wear certain things, or they wouldn't want me to meet certain people. And we are okay with it. We don't realize that this might be problematic later on. And then what happens is that you get isolated because there's overprotection. So your movements are controlled. And when your movements are controlled, you are, of course, isolated. So then there is isolation. Then there is restrictive control of resources. For example, then, like I spoke about, financial dependence. So this person wouldn't want to let you be, wouldn't let you make choices about the way you want to live your life, wouldn't let you spend your money the way you want to. And the common resources, how do you use your resources? So withdrawing from that. Then there is a punishment. So if you do something that they do not approve, and if they would find something that they wouldn't approve of, Like even if you
Hmm.
follow everything that they say, still they would pick on something that they would be upset about, because this is one way of them establishing their dominance over the victim. So
Hmm.
then this punishment through physical anger and physical harm is like, again, and emotional harm also, that throwing things, breaking things, banging doors, uh, rash driving to kind of scare you, um, trying to again berate you in front of others, and calling you out in
Hmm.
front of others, saying really secretive and very personal things about you in public, which you would feel very uncomfortable about. So this is their way of punishing the victim. And then once this happens, once this person is really broken, when this abuse has happened, the abuse window is done, then they act as if nothing has happened.
Hmm.
The next morning you wake up, like, I think this is something that we saw in the movie Thappad, that when Tapsi Pannu is slapped by the husband, he wakes up the next morning pretending like nothing is wrong,
Nothing happened. Yeah.
right? So that is just like an example that I'm giving. That wasn't a very typically abusive relationship. That was one odd incident. But even when, so they pretend like nothing has happened. So and they expect you to also pretend like that. So if you feel that, oh my god, yesterday this person was being really mean to me, and today thankfully he or she has calmed down, thank god. So now you don't want to
Hmm.
push it forward, right? Because you're kind of breathing a sigh of relief that at least it's not on the table anymore, I won't get hurt anymore, but not realizing that this is exactly what they want. And then after that, I mean, making you center of that universe again, making you sort of center of all their love and affection. They'll overshower you with love and gifts and compliments and all of that.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
cycle.
It's kind of like, it's kind of weird how like an abuser switches to that apologetic phase, like, I'm so sorry I did
Yeah,
that, it'll never happen. Like, it's yeah, it's kind of crazy how that, like, that switch happens, and
yeah,
anyone can
that's
fall
which
for that. Yeah.
it is very natural, and that's why these relationships they sustain, because you feel that, okay, this, like you mentioned, that it's one odd incident. You want to believe the partner you're in. All of us want to believe the partner that we are with, because we don't want to look like a fool for making a choice of being with them, right?
Yeah.
So we want to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. We think that we know them really well, and this is one stray incident, because we feel that we're really smart in making decisions about our partners. So that's something that we want to follow, that bias that we have in our head, confirmation bias, this is called. And we pick up
Yeah.
things, we kind of tend to ignore whatever wrong happened, but now he was so, or she was
That
so nice
doesn't
to me.
align with what we're thinking. We
Yes.
choose not to believe that. Yeah.
And we
Like,
will only choose to
yeah.
believe when they said that I love you, and you're
Yeah.
the most important, and you're the one who made me mad, you're the one who made me angry. So this was supposed to happen. Don't do it the next time. So this is how, when the cycle gets worse
Hmm.
and you start to actually believe that, okay, maybe I did something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of victims, this ties goes back to what you said, that how we choose to, like, we protect that by being biased, that, oh,
Yes.
I love this person and should protect this
Yes.
person. And I feel a lot of people come from that bias because they also want to protect that person in front of others, that.
Yes. Oh my God. That is so, so common, that when you start making excuses for your partner, know that something is not great. Like, you
Yeah.
have to know that if they are putting you in a spot every time and they can't take ownership of their own actions, that is something problematic. And it does get worse eventually. So that's that.
Yeah. So we talked about physical abuse and how, like, physical abuse is obviously apparent. What are some warning signs of an emotionally abusive relationship? Because that is a very gray area and a tricky place to be in, because you don't know whether this is an abuse or not, or someone who is going through it, you don't want to sort of meddle with their business,
Yeah.
until you're very sure that this is abuse or not. So how do you define that?
Number one thing is that be very sure if it's causing you any trauma. It has to cause you some sort of psychological trauma for us to call it abuse. Because if it's an everyday thing, that's how you connect. I mean, good for you. if both of you are doing it to each other, and that is one level wherein you feel more connected to your partner, that's completely different. But when you start to see psychological symptoms, like you start to see depression, anxiety, PTSD, all of those things, that is when you start to feel that, okay, this might not be normal. This is the first thing that you have to see, that there are some sort of psychological mm, manifestations of it. And then it starts with nitpicking. Like I earlier also mentioned, that it starts with pointing out small things about you, that
Mm.
your ears are too big, cover it up with your hair, or your neck is too deep, wear a jumper over it, anything, right? Starts with really small things, and how have you kept this and how you kept that, and basically, and then it probably progresses to constantly talking only about your flaws and never really giving you a compliment. And compliments are so rare, and they only happen when in the cycle of abuse, when they've actually done some major damage and when they want to get back on track. So that's it. And then lashing out a lot, like lash all of us lash out when we're upset or angry, but in an abusive relationship, you are center of all the negativity for this person. Like they're the super charming, super nice to people on the outside, very nice, and but when it comes to you, and every sort of lashing out has to be done on you, right? So
For the
essentially,
smallest things
for
also.
the smallest things, yeah, even if electricity has gone, right, if
Mm.
there's a power cut, so getting angry on you, right? So that's and then of course lying and gaslighting. Gaslighting is something, like I said before also, it is very, very prevalent in abusive relationships, because they completely deny any sense of ownership towards their actions, and they continuously doubt your version of reality, that this never happened, you're a fool, and you are over dramatic, you overthink, you have a problem with everything, things like that. And then what they do is they withdraw affection also a lot.
Yeah.
This is also one way of punishment, that this person who is abusive, that they're usually withdrawing love, and this we see very often, but it doesn't have to be on the smallest things. Like if somebody is withdrawing affection because they generally don't feel loving towards you, because you've pissed them off about something, that's a different thing, that might happen once a while. But if it's a regular thing, so notice that if this is what your spouse does a lot, that they just don't be nice to you, not at all, no affection at all, otherwise when they're an affectionate person. And then also I'd say that isolation is also one part, and you don't realize it, that they've isolated you from others. They try to break your social net because they don't want to appear as the abuser in front
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
people that you're talking to, and they also don't want them to convince the victim to
Yeah.
leave the
Yeah.
relationship,
And they
because
act, I feel for the most part, they act perfectly in front of the rest of like outsiders, basically, especially like
yes,
when they're with their partner, to show that nothing's great, no bad,
yeah,
everything's fine. Yeah.
yeah, that does happen a lot. That is quite common, when they pretend that everything is smooth. But people who are close to you, they can see through the cracks. They can see that a show is being put up. So, yeah, these are certain signs for initially of an emotionally abusive relationship.
So, so far we have discussed about what abuse is, different types of abuse, about the abuser, how the abuse happens, what goes like how the tricks are played basically by the abuser. But now I want to shift the perspective a bit about a victim's mind. What the consequences of an abusive relationship on a victim's mind and the mental health aspect of it. So
Right.
what are some like major consequences of abusive relationship on the victim's mind?
Number one is depression, of course. Depression, all of us know, it's not just generally feelings, and depression is a mental illness. And when you're completely really broken, you're sad throughout the day, there's nothing that really excites you, you don't feel hopeful at all about your future, and there are thoughts of self-harm and not wanting to live. All of these things, they entail depression. And then there's anxiety. So anxiety manifests in a lot of ways. So it's of course general breathlessness, or there's somebody who's feeling scared, feeling on edge, all of those things. And
Mm.
also they develop a lot of social anxiety, because these people have been berated so much, that they don't feel confident with themselves anymore. So they don't feel confident in talking to people. They have stopped talking to people for a very long time. So reintegrating it with a group is something that social anxiety also comes up a lot. And PTSD is something that also is very prevalent. That's mostly with physical abuse,
Yeah.
uh, post traumatic stress disorder, wherein you would get these dreams and nightmares about whatever happened to you. And then there are panic attacks that also happen. Panic attacks, they mimic heart attack. Like you would know that there's tightness in your chest, and all the symptoms of heart attack is something that panic attack uh, replicates. So
Hmm.
person feels this, and after that, eating disorder is also one. I know it's highly strange to
Hmm.
see that how eating disorder can come out of this, but it does. And because sometimes a lot of times when you are being nitpicked about how you look, people develop body dysmorphia, and
Yes.
because of not having a proper body image, so eating disorders also
Hmm.
happen.
I
And then
think
of course,
everything
yeah,
in a bigger picture is tied to self esteem. Everything
yes,
boils down to self esteem because all of these things
yes,
are related
yes,
to self esteem at the end.
yes. In fact, everything in our life essentially is related to self-esteem. And if
Yes.
if somebody really takes that away, that sense of self that we have, how we identify ourselves, the self concept, our do we think good about ourselves? You won't find people in abusive relationship very confident. You will not. No, you will not
Mm.
find people
Yeah.
in such
Yeah.
relationships having a healthy self-esteem. You wouldn't.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
there's a lot of self-blame also. A lot of times
Mm.
they would say that, why could I not get out? Why did I not see the signs earlier? What will people think
Yes.
of me? There's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt, there are trust issues in future relationships, there is hopelessness. Suicidal thoughts are a lot, prevalent. They feel that ending life is much better than being in this relationship, and let's end this once and for all. And I think lastly, self-harm is something that's also uh, quite rampant, because you want some sort of emotional numbing during this very
Mm.
draining process. So people harm
Mm.
themselves a lot also in abusive relationships.
Yeah. So we talked about how people who might be seeing someone get abused,
Hmm.
um, like they might ask, why are you still there? Or some people don't realize that someone's getting abused, some don't. And I feel like in the Indian society where people live like in joint families,
Hmm.
how and my personal experiences, I have known people who have lived with people who got abused.
Hmm.
So um, what are the consequences of abusive relationship? Like how do they have an impact on the victim's family or friend, and most importantly, if it's a parent abusing another parent, so what kind of consequences does it, or like impact does it have on the children, especially like young children?
Right. So let's start with family, immediate family. So when a family sees um, a person being abused in a relationship, first there are two ways how they handle it. One is that if the victim is seeking help, and they give help, so everything is fine. But when they withdraw help because they think that staying in this relationship, if it's marriage, of course, so staying in this relationship is very essential, and you can't break it off, and where will you go, and things like that, Indian society per se. Uh, that's that's one thing that really isolates and breaks the spirit of the person, the victim, because one place then that they thought that they would find some support is the family, and if they don't find that, that sort of breaks the spirit. And a lot of people also choose to stay in such violent marriages is because their parents never supported them getting out of that.
Yeah.
And then moving on, if it's not it's not a marriage, if it's just like a boyfriend girlfriend relationship or a girlfriend relationship, um, so what happens here is that if your parents get to know that your partner is being
Hmm.
abusive, so they do tell you, they make it a point to kind of convince you. And then the problem is that parents sit on a high horse. I'm sorry
Yeah.
for being so harsh with my tone, but this is, they don't act very empathetically, most of them. They would sit on a high horse, they will take a moral high ground that you shouldn't be with them, and you're not worthy or what, and they would just make these sweeping statements about you, and they would again hit your self-esteem. So then it would be such a difficult choice for this victim, that where do I go? My parents also think of me so lowly of me, and here is my partner who also thinks lowly of me, and since I have to spend rest of my life with this person, so might as well choose him or her. And if these people are really, if your parents, if your family, if your brothers, sisters, they are really pestering you out of concern, of course, that you need to get out of this relationship, then again, since you're being isolated from them in that abusive relationship, you would shut them out, because you can't take that sort of reality check. A lot of times in abusive relationships, people live in this bubble that no, this is just one way of this person loving me, that's all. At least they love me, right?
Yeah.
In their own contorted sense, this is what they think. So they shut people out when they are given a reality check. And that's again the similar thing for friends, because friends would say that this is not nice, whatever is happening to you is not good. And problem becomes when the friends start to compare you with their own relationship. Like, that's the worst. If you're trying to help somebody who's being abused, don't bring your marriage up, don't bring your relationship up, that no, my partner never does this to me, because this makes the victim feel more embarrassed, like they feel humiliated. They wouldn't want to come and talk to you if you again take a moral high ground. So it's very important to act empathetically, but it does not happen. So majority of the times what happens is that there's isolation again. The relationships sort of uh, wither away with time, such relationships with family and
Mm.
friends, because a lot of times they also feel very tired, that how many times are we supposed to tell them? So
Yes.
they also kind of give up. So that happens.
And what about if kids are
Oh
involved
yes,
in
yeah, yeah, yeah.
these
So that's
relationships?
the worst. I mean, a child should never go through this. And
Yes.
believe it or not, so many kids go through this. Like, the most people that I see for counseling have seen some sort of abuse, emotional, physical, happening around in their house, and that is why uh, how they relate in future is something that becomes problematic. So there are multiple ways that a child can grow up. Number one is that they become the abuser themselves, so they become the
Yeah.
bully.
Yeah. Most of
That,
the times I feel that
yes,
happens.
because that has been normalized
Yeah.
in the house, that okay, this is just one way to discipline, or one way to kind of
Mm.
make this
Control
person
someone.
listen, control someone. And control is has been given such a high regard in our society. That's the biggest problem, that control is everything in a relationship. So this
Mm.
is, if they see that happening in their house, this is of course they might, there are high chances that they would replicate the same thing in their future relationships. Kids in such households also go out and bully other kids in school. They beat up other kids in school because this is what they are seeing in the house. um, Also, they develop trust issues. These kids also have very low self-esteem, because they have not actually seen a lot of love and appreciation and care between partners. So later on in life, they develop a lot of attachment style disorders, like when you attach yourself in a relationship. So there are different attachment styles. So they never attach securely. Either they are
Mm.
anxious avoidant, they are
Insecure.
withdrawn, yeah, they are insecure. So this is what happens. And people would also grow up having PTSD. Again, kids would grow up having
Yeah.
PTSD, night terrors. They would have dissociative identity disorder. This is so common, I can't even begin to tell you. So dissociative identity, mostly in kids, what happens is that they would faint whenever there's anything that's stressful. So or they would start shivering, they would start to mimic fits. This is very common. And when we actually talk to these kids and we ask them that what happened, like, is everything around the house fine, how are your parents? And I mean, 90% of the time what comes out is that their parents have fights and the mother is beaten up most of the time. And everything around the house is very negative. So the child develops dissociative identity disorder. So
I did not know that this was that common in kids. This was
oh,
the dissociative identity.
it is in kids version. So they don't essentially take up on a new personality or a new
Yeah.
version of themselves, but to block that reality, they sort of faint. And they faint or
Hmm.
they develop tremors, or sometimes they would stop walking, their limbs would stop working. So this is one way of the
Oh.
body to protect themselves.
Hmm. Um, so when we talk about abuse, or when we talk about abuse in a marriage, the instantly what comes to our mind is like a man abusing a woman or a husband
Hmm.
abusing a wife. Um, so what are some gender like differences, or are there any gender differences when it comes to abusive relationship, like how male abusers are different from female abusers? Because most of the times it's not common to hear that females can also abuse. So like how what's the difference between the
Oh, they
two?
can definitely. And the bigger part of the type of abuse that women kind of shell out is emotional abuse, psychological abuse. That is more prevalent in women when it comes to sexual, physical, financial, uh, all of those things. So that is where women really don't measure up at all. In fact, when you look at it with a bird's eye view, then you will see that it is the abuse from women is less than 20% of the total abuse. And I looked up stats of different countries. So in UK, it is somewhere around 4%. And in the US, it's somewhere less than 10%, somewhere around 10%. And in India, it was difficult to find the stats because emotional abuse is really not considered any sort of abuse. So we
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
really accept.
Most people would not even, I feel like, know how to report that this
Yeah,
is, they might accept
because
it as
there's no
as
mechanism. How do you identify? Today we are talking about it, but a lot of people
yes.
don't even know that this is emotional abuse. And when I spoke about it on social media also, there were so many people who reached out to me saying that, oh, I didn't know that this was emotional abuse, and I might also be perpetrating that. I might be a perpetrator, and I didn't know that this was something that was abusive. So a huge chunk also comes from misinformation and being uninformed and
Hmm.
uneducated about the form of abuse. But yes, predominantly it's men who shell out the abuse, and majorly women really barely make up for anything in physical and sexual abuse. It's mostly men. And emotional abuse, both the genders, they they em- emotionally they abuse. But again, the part wherein men do it is much bigger than what women
Hmm.
sub-
Hmm.
subject their partners to.
What I feel in this whole thing is that, I mean, even like abuse is like the worst thing that can happen in a relationship. Um, you, me, and like others who are watching us can understand and can be like, yeah, this is right, and this needs to be talked about. But so many people in our country who are not that well read, who do not have access to media, they might be going through abuse and they don't know how to stop it. So that's the worst thing that can happen, I feel, to
That
them.
is, and patriarchy is so deeply rooted in our veins that we
For
would be
sure.
called homewreckers if we go on a mission
Yeah.
of telling people that, and women would also, jump on the bandwagon of kind of pointing us out and
Mm.
telling us that we are wrong because we
Yeah.
are essentially pointing out what's wrong with
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
abuse, and
Yeah.
we would be called the home wreckers. So
Yeah. This actually ties into my next question, which is, what are some of the stereotypes attached to abusive relationship which makes it acceptable in society?
okay, do you remember Kabir Singh? Did you watch it?
Oh my god, trigger.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
And the amount of defense that came for that movie was massive. Did you see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I understand that creative freedom is something that is important
Yeah.
in our country and it's just a movie. You shouldn't take it seriously. But this is a country where people take it seriously. So I think there's some
Yeah.
responsibility
Yeah.
lies
And
on.
I feel like in India, where celebrity culture is celebrated so much, where like
Mhm.
from like a celebrity's clothes to their hairstyle to their like just figure, body, everything copied so much. How can they even think about, and where patriarchy is so deeply rooted, how can they even think about putting this out as a creative.
You put out a movie and then you justify it that okay, if
Yeah,
a man and a
yeah,
woman can't slap each other in a relationship, they're not even in love.
yes,
Are we
yes,
animals? Really? I mean, what? So this is what normalizing that I'm talking about. See, some stereotypes that this is a way of showing love,
yeah.
possession.
Like the movie Thappar you mentioned before.
Yes,
In that, even the lawyer that she goes to, she asks a
yes,
bunch of questions. Was there sexual abuse? Did they ask for dowry? Did they do something? And she says no, and she's like, then what happened? And then she's like, he slapped me, and the lawyer's like, so what?
yeah.
This is what this happens. You can't like file for divorce for this. And
Because our
I'm
law
sure
doesn't
they were
say
showing
it.
the reality.
That is the reality because
Yeah,
yes, of course, slapping would come under physical violence, but then people would just rebuff for sure, like you
because it's
breaking a
just one
marriage.
slap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're breaking a
that
marriage because
happened.
of one slap. And
Yes,
see, I think it's a personal choice for whoever wants to deal with it, whoever doesn't want to deal with it. Nobody has to be judged
yes,
for the decision that they're making. And
for sure.
rightly said that if she was unable to move from that incident, why should she be put in that situation? That guy never apologized to her. He sort of
Hmm.
just wanted to pretend like it never happened. And when he finally apologizes, he says that, come home, what will
Hmm.
others say? He never
Yeah,
said that see, that was, and I never read it in any articles or blogs before, but when he said it, what others are going to say, that's what hit me. Like, you never really
hmm.
apologized for your own actions. You were only bothered about what society is going to say.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this is what feeds into stereotypes that you can't break relationships. Like, that's the
yes,
biggest stereotype. That even if it's
yes, yes,
unhappy, saath janam and all of that you have to do,
yes, yes,
that crap sort of stays. They have romanticized this crap, honestly. And
for sure.
with such romantic movies wherein they say that, oh
Yeah,
my god, dulha ek ladki ka gehna is sharam. So I
yeah,
mean, these are the stereotypes, and we live in
yeah,
these stereotypes, and it's nothing outwardly. We feel that they
yeah.
have so they've made it sound so unreal, but when we actually go in situations, we see that this is really inspired from reality. Why do you think Ekta Kapoor's serials are watched so much? It is because it's
Yeah.
the reality.
It's the reality. She banged on that, the
Yeah,
reality of
exactly.
things.
So this is the stereotype that, this is the way of showing love. Possession is a way of love. Ownership is a way of love. And stereotype is that you shouldn't get out of a relationship. You should do
Yeah,
everything in your power to um,
yeah, yeah,
be in this relationship. And
yeah.
controlling is cute, basically. Some
Hmm.
people find it really adorable. Oh my
That
god.
that someone's possessive of
Yeah,
me. So it's like
yeah,
in that movie itself, there were two examples that really stood out to me. One was the guy's friend who says, "So what? Like thappad to chalta hai. Like in all in pyar mein thappad to agar ho jata
huh,
hai, so it's fine." That and the girl's mother being like, it's
hmm,
your house, it's your family, you take care of it. And I
yeah,
feel that is and that goes back to our point, where we were talking about how when someone tries to reach out to their parents, sometimes parents are also like, it's a
yeah,
marriage, you deal with it. And I feel that is so sad because you parents, if someone has like a close relationship with their parent, they're the first person that they would want to reach out to and want to
oh
get help,
yeah.
and they get like shut down from them because it's okay apparently.
Yeah, it's very devastating because just because you think that it's a taboo. And I'm very happy for the fact that people are actually, the boomer generation is freaking out that,
Yeah,
divorce rates are at their all-time high. But don't you think that this is nice that people are choosing to kind of end unhappy marriages and actually trying to move on with somebody else or on their own? And because a lot of it has to do with financial independence. A lot of
yes,
it has to do with
yes,
that. And I think that is amazing that when people have some sort of control in their hands, this is when they're able to kind of take a stand for themselves, even when the families are not supporting. There are tons of women who are actually end such abusive marriages. They live on their own, family never supported, but they are bringing their kids up.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
hard, but
It's hard,
still,
yeah, it's not impossible, yeah, for sure.
yes.
And yeah, yeah, like thinking about something like, again, going back to the idea of comfort zone and thinking about
Hmm.
going out of the comfort zone is is terrifying for
It
people,
is.
but I think you like, if you have a strong mind, you can get there.
Right. And if your self esteem before all of this happened was decent enough, like
Yeah,
that's very important. that you think that you'll be able to sustain without that.
Yeah. So, how should one support one's emotional health when in an abusive
Mhm.
relationship, when they know that they're
So
getting
number
abused?
one is like you have to identify first that it is an abusive relationship. Number
Yeah.
one, then acknowledge it. Don't shut your eyes. That don't block whatever triggers you. Right? Just don't stop looking at content which points out that there are a lot of Instagram handles which talk about abuse, and people who are in abusive relationships, they sort of block those pages because they feel, oh, this triggers me too much. So don't do that.
Mm,
Educate yourself, acknowledge it that this is happening, and then uh, therapy is something that is the best. I mean, it there's a lot of self discovery that happens in therapy, and a lot of times, things that come to surface are that why would you stay in this relationship? Did something happen in childhood that was traumatizing enough that you feel that this is the way forward? And then a lot of faulty thought patterns that a victim might have would also change in therapy. So that therapy is a great way. Then I would say that developing self-esteem is something that would be very helpful, uh, if somebody is going through abuse, because whatever ways that you can do it, like what I say is that every night before going to bed, just say three things that you really like about yourself or the others like about you, that you've been complimented, or just remind yourself of any three achievements that you ever uh, I mean, what you achieved, three things that you achieved throughout your life. Just mention them. So what happens is your brain starts to believe them. When you tell
mm,
yourself this every day, your brain rewires it from uh, away from what that abuser has been feeding into you. So when you start to rewire your brain into thinking that no, you're worthy, your self-esteem is high, uh, you are an important person, all of those things. So some self-esteem building exercises would be great. Then developing financial independence is also very important. A lot of problems from there. So develop some sort of financial independence in any way or shape or form. Start saving, invest somewhere when you have enough savings. Just feel that yes, once you get out of this relationship, you would have something to fall back on. Then little things in everyday schedule should be done for your own self. Like you should feel that yes, I'm doing something for myself. And it's like any sort of self-care routine, even if it's starting a new hobby, you will feel that yes, uh, this is not for my partner and this is for myself. So that also sort of gives you a very egocentric approach wherein you're fending for yourself, looking out for yourself. Then do not fall into trap of insincere apologies. When
mm,
this abuser has apologized in the past, see if their attitude has changed, see if they are actually apologetic and they've changed their behavior. And if they haven't, that's when you know that you check it off, that okay, it didn't happen this time, and write down everything that they are doing which is wrong. When you have something written down in front of you, it makes more sense to your brain. Yes, it is triggering a lot of times, but then again, it will serve as, um, you know, a great motivation for you to break off that relationship. And then develop a strong relationship on the outside also with your family and friends. Start to talk to them again, start to indulge with them anyhow, social media and or texting or meeting or whatever it is possible in this relationship. Start to build that net again so that when you move out, you have people to kind of hold you tight. And lastly, I would just say that psychoeducate your partner also. They might not even know that this is abuse, and then you can't really blame the other party, because uh, you don't blame somebody for not knowing what's bad, right? So I mean, psychoeducating them, telling them, okay, these are the instances when you did this, and this is how I felt, and I read about it, I educated myself over it, so I want to discuss this with you. It doesn't help my mental health. And when you start to say all of these things, when you try to introduce the topic of abuse to them, high chances that a lot of people might understand and change their behavior, right? Because if that's something that they've grown up with, that's what social conditioning has been like. So you will have to take some pains of changing that in your partner. And I think that's about it. I think all the things that you can do in an abusive relationship.
yes. So, just to wrap this topic up, what are some, like, what are the right measures if there are any, to take in order to address this issue and stop abuse in a relationship? Because sometimes people think that it was, if it's like physical abuse, especially like we talked about, if it's just a slap, some people think that, oh, maybe this is nothing, maybe this won't happen in the future. So for things like those where there is a lot of gray area, what are the right measures for someone who is being abused or someone who knows who's being abused?
So what you have to decide for yourself is what's right for you, and if your rights and wrongs align with your partner. That's very important. And again, you have to communicate it to them. Communication is number one. See, we do believe in salvaging the relationships, right? We do believe that we shouldn't bolt if there's something that's curable. So uh, if the first step would be that you psychoeducate your partner about it, like I said before, also that you tell them that this is happening and this is not nice and this is part of abuse, and this is the first step. If that does not happen, I would strongly recommend that you have to take a stand for yourself. You have to prioritize yourself, number one. If your partner tries to berate you, and you have to voice your concern and saying that I don't like this, I don't appreciate this, and you have to uh, communicate it to them that there are a million things that are wrong with you, but do I ever point that out? Do I ever make you feel like that? Compare your uh, reactions to them with theirs, and that's when you kind of lay it into the open that this is how I behave with you, this is how you behave with me, and do you think this is fine? Is this how humans behave? Ask them that, is this human? And also tell them that the way they behave, is this the same way they would want their sisters to be treated, their daughters to be treated? If you think that this is the way somebody related to you should be treated, then I'm sorry, I can't be in this relationship with you because you've normalized it. For you, this is something that's natural. And then lastly, if it has gotten out of hand, I would strongly suggest to report it. Just report it.
Mm, mm,
Authorities need to know. I mean, uh, threaten reporting also. A lot of times this stops when you threaten the partner that this is going to go to the courts, and
mm,
and I mean they the severity would go down. But essentially, I would say that if it's something that has gotten really out of hand, it has to be ended. There's no other way. If somebody's a serial abuser and this is their way of life, so you can't really change them unless
mm,
they are ready to go to therapy again,
yeah,
because we believe in a person-centered psychology. We believe that human beings are essentially good,
yeah, yeah,
and when human beings are essentially good, they wouldn't want to put anybody else through the pain, a lot of pain, unless there's something going on with them.
yeah,
So find out
yeah,
what's going on with them. Is there something that is so wrong that they, in their head, uh, their ideas, their thoughts are so contorted that that is making them do things like that? Then therapy is a great way to go.
yeah. I think, yeah, being self-aware is so
Hmm.
important, which, like, it's easier said than done for sure. Like, for all we talked about, it's all of this that we talked about,
Yeah.
it's easier said than done, but if you do it, it can go a long way.
Yeah.
um so that was it from us, but we have a question from one of our viewer, and they have asked, what could be the initial steps in terms of improving the relationship with the partner? So I feel like, I think they mean that, um you know not every, I feel, abusive relationship is abuse happens and it
Hmm.
happens, becomes bigger into
Hmm.
something bigger. Most of the time it does happen once, and people do, like, the abuser does change,
Right.
can happen. So for those people who are trying to improve their relationship, who are trying to move on from that incident, what are the steps that people can take?
Again, you have to at least communicate it to your partner that this is abuse, this is not normal, and what you're doing is not right. I don't approve of it, and it shouldn't happen again, because then I would have to reconsider this relationship. Like, I don't like being in a relationship where I'm treated like this. And you have to kind of spell it out to them if they are unable to get the severity of the situation. And then again, when I say that, try to not isolate yourself from your friends, maintain a
Yeah.
very, very strong uh, net of social support, and
Yes.
always find time to do things for yourself. Don't let the relationship consume you. See, what
Mm,
happens in relationships a lot of times is that they become so all consuming that your entire
mm,
energy, your all your efforts, your time is going into that relationship. So don't do that. take some time off for your personal growth also, and do one thing, at least one thing every day that is only that you're doing for yourself. Even if it's 11-step Korean skincare, I don't care. But it should, something should be there for you to uh, feel that, yes, I am also taking care of myself. I would strongly suggest that these things should be more emotional and less materialistic. Please don't go out shopping and buying stuff for yourself, saying that I know this is what I
Yes.
did for myself. That's very
Yeah.
surface level.
Yeah.
That won't solve anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these are
Yeah.
the initial signs. Go for couples therapy. I'd say that initially, if you see these things coming up, so when a professional, when a therapist makes you sit in front of them, and that's when you communicate that this happened. So the person would, in any way, sort of shape or form, would try to justify that why did I do it. And if you understand that why did they do it, and if sometimes even your actions are such that are also abusive, a lot of times we can see what the other person is doing, but
Mm.
there has to be some sort of self-reflection also.
Mm. Great. Thank you so much, Gargi, for joining us today and talking about abusive relationships and the impact that it can have on people. I'm sure a lot of us learned about what abuse actually is and how it's not just physical, like most people might think. And for our viewers, if you are someone who's getting abused or knows someone who's being abused, please try and reach out for help, because asking for help is just a small step towards a very big change. And
Yes.
I would like to conclude by saying that by visiting the MHT website, you can find resourceful information, mental health professionals, as well as products on various issues such as anxiety, autism, Alzheimer's disease, sleep, memory, and much more. And for our loyal viewers, you can use the code MHT No to Abuse to avail extra 5% off all the products, which is valid only for today, that is Sunday, October the 18th. And yeah, thank you for tuning into this live. Please like, share, and subscribe to MHT.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.